Today, I'm chatting with Kyle Forrest, who's the future HR leader at Deloitte. And when he's not on the HR conference circuit, he's collaborating with HR and business leaders to design the future of the HR function with the goal of driving business and human outcomes.
It's a mouthful, Joel. I know.
It's a mouthful. I wanted to do a good intro for you.
I appreciate it. And thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited to have you on. First topic of business. So this is graduation season right now. Like literally tomorrow is the high school graduation in my hometown here outside of Vancouver, Washington. And I know that you do a lot of events and you work with a lot of early career Gen Zers. So what advice do you have to give for the class of 2025 that's going to be entering the workforce soon?
I think there's three things that I would share, Joel, and some of it I'm borrowing from people who are in Gen Z, just ahead of them, and 26, 27, out talking on stages, right, at some of these conferences. First one, have courage. Actually use your voice, raise your voice, whether that is to say, I don't know and I need help, but I want to learn, or if it's, hey, I do want to come in the office and learn from folks, or even, this is an idea I have because here's how I am using something like AI and automation to do things differently. So have courage. Second, be curious. Actually take the time to learn what your colleagues are learning and doing, whether that's the role or even personally. Folks might be a little anxious about using AI, so be curious for why they are and help them on their own journey. And lastly, be flexible. The world of work has changed over the entirety of your 4-year college duration. It will change again in the next 4 years. Just be ready to continue to stay flexible. So have courage, be curious, be flexible.
So Deloitte published a global human capital trends report that I got a copy of ahead of time. It was great. Really loved the insights and the findings from that. One area that really stuck out to me that I'd like to discuss, and it's one that I've actually heard other business leaders talk about, outside of this report, and some of the partners that I work with have surfaced this as well, is the challenge that organizations are having right now in making technology investment decisions, especially when that's concerning or centered around AI. Could you talk a little bit about that and this mismatch that's happening right now with organizations using traditional linear ROI equations for buying decisions, and how that doesn't really match up or line up with the expansive, almost limitless use cases and value cases of AI?
Absolutely. And Joel, there was a wealth of data that we saw in the Human Capital Trends report tied to this. But I'll start with this almost call to action that we've given to organizations is, how do you actually take almost an R&D approach or mindset to technology investments, especially those that have AI and automation tied to it, versus a traditional approach, right? And what I mean by that is what you just said, right? This almost limitless unknown set of capabilities that AI and automation tools can bring forward. Because the speed at which change has been happening every few months means you're constantly having to invest in introducing those new capabilities back out to the same use case, right? Versus historically, you would say, I've implemented an HCM and I've implemented these modules. I'm done with my investment other than the twice a year release cycle to uptake some new functionality, right? So it's a little different. But what I would say broadly were a couple of the things that we saw as like the mismatch was, number one, the traditional metrics around cost benefit don't capture, am I a 30% more productive software engineer, right? Or am I able to close deals faster as a salesperson because of how AI and automation is doing things, right? Or there was another trend that we had that said 40% of time spent by workers is on non-value add things, thinking a manager approving expense reports, managers and employees filling out performance evaluation forms, right? So if I unlock that capacity and deploy it to other things, how am I measuring that and pulling it all the way through? So we think there's a real opportunity for organizations to redefine the measures that they're using, take more of an R&D style approach to ongoing continuous investment, and you've got to make it explicitly clear as you focus what are not only the business outcomes, but the human outcomes, so you get workers more excited to adopt and buy in and change their behavior.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's increasing pressure, right? Both externally in the marketplace from competitors, but also internally for organizations to adopt and utilize and really evolve, right? This feels like an inflection point, a tipping point.
Yep.
That's one end of it. The other end is there's a lot of risk that comes along with that, that's centered around compliance, governance, security. So how are organizations navigating that?
Yeah, well, Joel, we recently released some different research around the evolving role of the CHRO. And analyzing a number of job descriptions, actually saw an increase in skill demand for compliance, which is interesting, right? Because people would say, oh, the HR function is the function of compliance and it's been trying to shift to be more strategic. But in fact, compliance can be very strategic from a business enabler perspective, whether that's cost avoidance, avoiding brand damage, whether for customer reputation, candidate reputation. Someone put it very appropriately the other day that said, if you can educate your customers as a technology company, how you're starting from a technology perspective that is compliant, you can accelerate getting through security and privacy requirements that companies might have. You can accelerate confidence that it will be deployed in the right way. And you avoid, if you are non-compliant, having to deal with that later in a way that might be disruptive to your business and to your customers' businesses, right? So starting from a place of compliance can drive tremendous business value.
Yeah, my take on the market, especially as it pertains to HR tech, work tech, is that adjacent to AI being, the biggest driving growth factor, your compliance and governance is right next to that as more companies are adopting and as the risk increases with that adoption, especially at the larger enterprise level.
Absolutely. Companies who are able to demonstrate a nimbleness around compliance and being compliant, whether that's the companies themselves or the vendors, I think will have an interesting edge, because there have been many times where organizations have to stop and pivot a ton of resources to go focus and make sure they are compliant with a particular thing, right?
Yep.
There's a substantial financial penalty or brand damage, right? And so how do you turn compliance into a competitive advantage, I think becomes an interesting focus area in the world going forward.